if you have your Bibles, flip with me over to Exodus chapter 19. We're going to be reading verses 1 through 8. This is the same text that we covered last week, but we're going to finish what we unpacked last week. I'm so excited about today. Exodus chapter 19, starting with verse 1. On the third new moon, which again, we said this last week, is 60 days after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt. On that day, they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain. While Moses, he went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel." I want you to circle the name Jacob and Israel because I saw something last night in that. I'm like, I had to research. I'm like, why did he use Jacob and Israel? Here it is. Jacob and Israel, same person, right? In the Old Testament, Jacob, this is the house of Jacob. So these are Jacob's descendants that have been sent out of Egypt into ultimately the promised land. Jacob was his original name, which meant deceiver. And then God is like, hey, don't forget, house of Jacob, house of Israel, I'm the one who called you out of Egypt where you were once a slave. And now I am calling you into the promised land, O Israel. Okay, so there's Jacob the deceiver. I'm changing your name to Israel, the children of promise. That's awesome. Okay, so if you don't get that, that just kind of blew my mind last night. I'm like, why did he use Jacob and Israel? Verse 4, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, and here's today's verse, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And that's it. This is the word of the Lord. You can go ahead and be seated. Oh, wow. Okay. I promise I know this sermon. Where we are, and this is why it's so fun. What we are doing is we're connecting the Old Covenant to the New Covenant, and we're talking specifically about the Old Testament law. So in Exodus chapter 19 through Exodus chapter 24, God gives Moses, calls him up to Mount Sinai, and gives him what we know of the law. Now, the law is interesting because ultimately there's going to be 613 commands or 613 laws, directives that God has given to his people and showing them this is how we are going to commune. This is how we are going to have a relationship together under the old covenant. And then in Exodus chapter 20, he specifically starts with the most famous of those 613 laws, which are the 10 commandments. So these are the ones that we know that children are taught when they're little. It's the ones that if we're into politics, we're like, hey, we got to get the 10 commandments into every classroom. And I understand why you fight for that, but remember this, the laws were written for a specific people, for the people of God. They don't apply to everybody. They apply to God's children, okay? So do with that what you want, but that's what the law was written for. Now, the question for us as Christians, 2,000 years after the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, is what do we do with the law? How do we handle the law? How does the law even apply? Does it apply to us at all? This is an old covenant thing. Didn't Jesus come to fulfill the law? What do we do with that? So last week we talked about this. We said that most people, when they think about faith and they think about the relationship with the law, they typically fall into one of two camps, and both camps are wrong. Camp number one is this idea that my faith or my spirituality, my spiritual journey is all about rules. Obey this, do this checklist. If I do this, if I don't do these things, and a lot of us, this is how we grew up. If you grew up Southern Baptist, this was kind of your way of life, right? Don't go to the movies, don't do a dance, don't play cards, and then you're going to be okay. So it's all about these rules. If I do these things, if I obey these laws, then I'm going to be saved by what I do, which is so counter-biblical, right? So there's camp number one. So if I obey these laws, if I do these things, then me and God are good. The second camp is kind of a little bit more new agey. It's like, hey, my faith, my spirituality isn't about obedience or commands at all. As a matter of fact, that's outdated. The law is outdated because Jesus came to fulfill the law. He didn't come to abolish it, he came to fulfill it. So no longer is it about obedience. It's now about feelings and vibes, right? It's just about my emotions and my heart and following my heart. And this is what it's all about, okay? There's a kid having a great time behind the curtain right now. So these are the two camps that we can fall into if we're not careful. Camp number one is all about the rules and says, hey, if I obey, I'm good with God. And camp number 2 is like, hey, the rules, it doesn't even matter what you do. Okay, who needs obedience? Who needs commands? Who needs rules? Just have vibes, and you're all good. Okay, so again, this is a really simple way to look at the law. It's too simplistic of a way to look at the law. So what we're trying to do over last week and this week is unpack what is God talking about in Exodus 19 through 24, specifically with the law and how it pertains to us as new covenant Christians under Christ. What does that look like? How does the law work? What's the purpose of the old covenant law? Does it still apply to any degree? And if so, how? So that's what we're looking at. So what we pointed out last week is that I think in Exodus 19 through 24, specifically here in 19, that in the law, we're going to find that God has 5 purposes for it and for us. Man, that kid is having a good time. So stay focused. There are 5 purposes of the law for us as new covenant Christians. So if you'll stay with me, let's think through this. Number 1, and we covered the first 2 last week, right? So we're not going to go through all 5 of them today. We're just going to do the final 3. Last week we talked about this. The law marks us as God's treasured possession. And this is really a beautiful one. This is God saying, listen, the reason I'm giving you the law is because you are mine. I'm not giving you the law to make you mine. If you remember last week from Exodus chapter 19, we read it here in verses 1 through 4. God starts with this idea. He points out, he's like, don't forget, I'm the one who pulled you out of Israel. I'm the one who carried you as an eagle on his wings. I'm the one who carried you out. Now obey me. And that order is really, really important. First, I carried you out. Now I'm asking you to obey me. It wasn't the opposite. It wasn't, if you obey me, then I will carry you out of Egypt. He's pointing out the fact, guys, listen, I did everything in the work of salvation. You did nothing. All you did, he's like, I dropped the plagues. I did all the plagues. I opened the sea. I shut the sea. I did all of that. All you did was by faith, you walked forward. You obeyed what I told you to do, okay? So I did everything in this. And the beauty of this, and this is what we looked at last week, the beauty of this is this kind of a relationship between a parent and a child. Like, hey, kid, to all my kids, my 2 kids, I give them rules, but I don't give them rules so that they will become part of my family. I give them rules because they are my family. This is just going peachy today. Hi, FedEx. Nice to see you. Sile is closed today. Should we just conclude? Just, wow. I'm really excited about what God has in here. So, again, you stay with me, I'll stay with you, okay? That poor, did you see his face? It's like, oh. FedEx got the door of shame today. So parents, bringing it back. Parents, what we do with our kids, we give them rules not to make them part of the family, but because they are. Caden, mow the lawn. Not to become a do-ford, but because you are a do-ford. Obey. And in this, and this is the beautiful thing about last week, God gives us law, and in the law, we get to see God's heart. We get to see what matters to him. Remember, those people that we love, we want to find out what makes them tick, the things that they love, the things that they dislike. And then we kind of feed into that. It's like, my joy is found in your joy. For Melanie, it's like, hey, I want to make her happy because happy wife, happy life, right? This is what this is saying. So God's giving us his law saying, this is what matters to me. Integrity, honesty, justice, righteousness, repentance, forgiveness. These are things that matter to me. And then he says, you're my treasured possession. And this is a king saying, I own everything. I own the roads, I own the people, I own everything. But my most treasured possession, the thing I dote on, is you. The things I keep closely to me at all times is you. So the law, first of all, marks us as that, the ones he dotes on. Secondly, the law marks us as a new community. So where the rest of the world is trying to get the attention of their God in their new cities, they're building mountains, they're building pyramids, they're building temples, they're making sacrifices, waving their arms. Pay attention to me, look at my accomplishments, look at my achievements. God, would you give to me? Would you do what I want you to do? Would you be my genie on a shelf? Would you do all this? God's like, that's not how I work. You are my children. Now I'm asking you to obey as a reflection of my love to you and your love to me. And you don't need to beg me to come down. I'm already here. And I am beckoning you to myself rather than you beckoning me to you. Okay, so that's what's going on in the law. And the first 2 things that we see, where first of all, the law marks us as God's treasured possession. Secondly, the law makes us a new community. The third one, and so we're going to do 3, 4, and 5 today. Number 3 is basically the same thing as the second one, where we're a new community. Now, it's just using different verbiage, which means a little bit different, something a little bit different. So the third thing that the law does for us is it makes us a kingdom of priest, a kingdom of priest. So Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, it just says this, you shall be to me, okay, so you shall be to me a kingdom of priest and a holy nation. Now, for those of us that weren't raised Catholic, okay, this term priest, or even maybe if you're Jewish, if you have a background in Judaism, this word priest is kind of an uncomfortable word for us. We're like, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? And now, in order to define what a kingdom of priests is, what God means by this, you shall be for me a kingdom of priests, we first of all have to ask, what is the role of a priest? What does a priest do? And simply put, and we're going to get to this in much more detail when we start talking about the tabernacle later on in the book of Exodus, but at its most basic level, what a priest does is he's a mediator. Okay, he's a mediator, and he's a mediator between God and man. Now, this is interesting. Who does he mediate on behalf of? Who does the priest mediate on behalf of? And the truth is both, right? He represents God to the people, but he also represents the people to God. So that's what a mediator does, which if that doesn't foreshadow Jesus, I don't know what does, okay? So at this point, before the temple or the tabernacle has been established, at this point, who is acting as the priest in the book of Exodus? It's Moses and Aaron, right? So they're representing God to the people, and we see this in Exodus 19. Moses takes these words to God and says, this is what the people said, and God's like, okay, now to go tell the people that I said this, and he's the mediator. He's going back and forth. And then in the new covenant, it's like, hey, I have a high priest in Jesus. I don't need somebody to mediate for me any longer. I've got direct access to God. So at its most basic level, a priest is one who mediates. And so he's saying, I'm making all of you guys priests. Every single one of you. I am making you a mediator between God and man and between man and God. Basically what he's saying, this is an evangelistic call. He's like, I'm making you as a nation, I'm making you a priest, and what I want you to do is I want you to demonstrate in your obedience to the law. So in all the things that I'm commanding of you, in your integrity, in your justice, in your sexuality, in the way you handle power, in the way you handle money, and these things that I command of you, I want you to be separate and different from the rest of the world because you are representing me. You are mediating me to the people. And as you do that, they will see me. So this is what God's doing. He's calling us to a priesthood so that we can show God to the people. Now, it's interesting because in the New Testament, Jesus does something very similar in his most famous sermon. In Matthew chapter 5, we see the Sermon on the Mount. Dave Weir has preached on this a number of times. In Matthew chapter 5, this is what we see. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16. This is Jesus speaking. So this is where you get the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer. It's just rich with stuff. This is what Jesus says. He says, you are the light of the world. You're a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but they put it on a stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. So this, if you were a little kid, grew up in church, it's like, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, right? Hide it under a bushel. Heck no, right? That was the closest we could come to swearing in church. I'm not going to let it shine. So this is where this comes from. It's also where the text about you are the salt of the earth, okay? So it gives off light to the whole house. Verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others, or let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do you see the connection? You see the connection in Exodus chapter 19. It's like you're a royal priesthood, which we're going to see later on in 1 Peter. You're this priesthood. And a priesthood is a mediator. You're going to represent God to the people so the nations will come to me. So the nations will know who I am. But I'm making you separate. I'm making you holy. I'm making you different. The way you handle justice, the way you handle sexuality, the way you handle money, the way you handle your relationships with one another, it's going to make a statement to other people. When they see you loving and caring for people that outside of the church, you would never even talk to, they're going to see God. When they see you reconciling with people you have no business forgiving, they're going to see God. When they see you being generous with your money, instead of manipulating your money and your resources for your own gain and your own power, they're going to see God. But it's interesting. Exodus 19, he doesn't say, listen, you are going to be priest. I'm going to make you a priest. What does he say? I'm going to make you a kingdom of priest, plural. Now, here's what's going on. This is the grammar side of things again, and we've covered this, we've unpacked this before. In Exodus chapter 19 and in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, the same thing happens. The word you is used, okay? The word you. You are a kingdom of priests. You are the light of the world, Jesus says. So you are a kingdom of priests, Old Testament. You are the light of the world, New Testament. And again, this is where English fails us, right? Because whether we're talking second person singular or second person plural, we all use the word you, okay? So what I mean by that is there's Chris. You are Chris. To my knowledge, unless you're tricking all of us, you are Chris Riggs, okay? So the second person singular, you. Then I look at the 90, 100 people here and I go, you are Orlando North. And from the context, we're supposed to be able to understand one is singular, there is one Chris Riggs, but you, plural, are one Orlando North, okay? So fortunately, like we've said before, and I think Cynthia has helped me with this, you guys, we've got language for this where the rest of the country doesn't, or the rest of the Midwest has it, but it's really ugly, okay? So first person, or second person singular is the word you. Now, second person plural in the South, y'all, or, help me, Cynthia, all y'all, okay? So it's all y'all. Now, where I'm from in Michigan, it's yous guys or yousuns. It's just, it's horrible. So, and I'm telling you, when I hear my relatives speak, I'm like, I talk like that? That's how I used to talk. It's horrible. And they will make fun of the South for the word y'all. That's the number one word they make fun of, okay? And you guys make fun of them for the word pop, okay? So we just make fun of these words. But the word y'all helps us. It gives us a second person plural word to use. Ladies and gentlemen, Exodus 19, Matthew chapter 5, God is speaking to the children of Israel. You all y'all, Israel, all y'all are a kingdom of priests. Individually on your own, you're not a kingdom of priests. You are not, in Jesus' words, you are not the light of the world, a city that stands on a hill by yourself. Y'all are, though. One cannot be a city by yourself. And this is what Jesus is saying. This is what God is saying in Exodus chapter 19. All y'all are a kingdom of priests. And in the way you handle my law is how you are going to mediate God to the world. What an honor. What a blessing that is. So it's in community. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why over the past maybe 4 years, really post-COVID, I have preached so hard, the understanding of what the church is. That church isn't just come and be entertained, receive the word, sing some songs, and go out and do your thing. Now, we've got a slogan here to go and be Christ Church to the world, but that doesn't mean we go and be Christ Church to the world alone. Like our life, the church is supposed to be the centerpiece of our lives. Like our community with one another is supposed to be everything. This is how we hold each other accountable. This is how we grow. This is how we're made disciples, is in community. You cannot fulfill the laws that God has given us or even the New Testament instructions on your own. How do you demonstrate repentance? How do you demonstrate brotherly love and forgiveness if you don't have community? And so this is what this is saying. So not only are we God's treasured possession, as we see in the law, not only we're a new community where things are different, right? We're going to live holy lives, but also we are a priesthood, a kingdom of priests who mediate for God here on this earth so people will see him in community. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing that the law does for us is the law reveals how your heart really works. I always get amped up whenever the word heart comes because I just remember, especially in my youth group years, I love the fact that we have such a solid biblical youth pastor here at Orlando North. We really do. Zach isn't just a teddy bear or a golden retriever. He genuinely loves the word of the Lord, and he wants what's true. And he's going to be preaching in a couple weeks. And I don't know if there's anybody I trust more than Zach, because he can study his butt off, and he just loves the word. But I remember in youth group, when I was growing up, so much of it was about feeling. It really was. It was just about, and God created emotions. Let's not dismiss this. God gave us passions and he gave us emotions. However, our emotions and our heart are easily deceived. So whenever I see the word heart, I'm like, ooh, a little antsy on that. But God is also the one throughout his word that is saying, create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. So the heart matters. My emotions, my attitudes, these all matter. So one of the things the law does is it reveals how our hearts really work. Let me show you what I mean by this. One of my favorite Old Testament texts over the years has become the introduction to the Ten Commandments. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk through the Ten Commandments. We're not going to, it would have been easy just to be like, okay, so thou shalt not steal. Let's talk about that. Here's what it means, ladies and gentlemen. Don't steal things. Okay, so there's the sermon. Don't covet, don't commit adultery, don't do it. That's bad stuff. But there's a bigger picture that we often miss because we're focused so much on these specific rules that we miss how God sets it up. Exodus chapter 20, starting with verse 1, going through verse 3. Check this out. This is awesome. God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. So here it is again. God starts almost all his speeches in the book of Exodus with his identity. I am the Lord. Let me show my card. I am the Lord, your God, okay? I am, which means what? So it goes all the way back to the burning bush where he says, I am. Take off your sandals. You're on holy ground. I am the Lord. When he says, I am the Lord, your God, what is he also declaring? I am the Lord, therefore, you are not. I am, you are not. I am the Lord, Pharaoh's not. I am the Lord, Satan's not. I own everything. Everything belongs to me. Anything that providentially happens comes under my authority. I am the Lord. And this is how he starts the Ten Commandments. He hasn't given him one rule. He starts with an identification. I am the Lord. And he says this, I am the Lord your God. And then he reminds them, I'm the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Pharaoh didn't do that. Moses didn't do that. Aaron didn't do that. People of God, you didn't do that. I was the one who carried you on eagle's wings. I did this. I am the Lord your God. I am the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Verses 1 and 2, he sets it up. He reminds them who he is. Then what does he do? What is verse 3? You shall have no other gods before me. There's the first of 613 laws. In our list of 10 commandments, the very first one is, you shall have no other gods before me. So before he gives any rules, before he gives one of 613 laws, he first of all identifies himself. I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of slavery. Why did I bring you out of the land of slavery? Because I treasured you, because I loved you, because you are mine. Okay, so he's identifying who he is, he's identifying who you are, and then he's saying, now that you know who I am, I'm in authority, I'm in charge, I'm the one who has the way, and you are my children, and I love you, and you're my valued treasure. And because of that, I'm now going to give you rules. He doesn't say, hey, obey these 10 things. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, let's flip it. Let's go backwards. You shall have no other gods before me. No graven images. Honor your father and mother. Do not steal. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not covet. Do not do all these things. And if you don't do these things, then I will be the Lord your God and I will bring you out of Egypt. It doesn't work that way, right? Andy Stanley, as much as I don't agree with many of the things he preaches, he had a really good one-liner because he's really great at one-liners. He said this long time ago. The law was not given as a condition for a relationship, but as a confirmation of a relationship that already existed. And that's what's going on. So he's revealing our heart. He goes, I'm the Lord. This is who you are. Now here's the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. Now Martin Luther, the reformer in the 1500s, and praise God for Martin Luther, and praise God Martin Luther was a dreadful sinner at the same time who needed God's grace. But he spent a lot of time in the book of Exodus, specifically in the 10 Commandments, more than anybody I know, any more than any theologian I know. And this is his conclusion. Listen to what he says about the first commandment of the 10. First commandment being, you shall have no other gods before me. This is what Martin Luther said. The first commandment is to shine and give its splendor to all the others. Therefore, it is like a hoop and a wreath, joining the end to the beginning and holding them all together. Let it be continually repeated and not forgotten. He's saying that the first commandment rules the roost. Every other commandment after this is a derivative of this first commandment. Okay? You shall have no other God before me. Everything else is a derivative of that. By the way, when Jesus comes and somebody asks him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Saying that, you shall have no other God before me. So this is the most foundational thing in our lives, and this is what the law is going to reveal. This is the one thing that we need to remember. So 613 laws, and then there's just some incredible editing. It's like, hey, ChatGPT, summarize 613 laws into one statement. Okay, you shall have no other gods before me, right? And we've talked about this in the New Testament. Like, what's the gospel summarized in one verse? What's the gospel summarized in one verse? You might say John 3:16, cool. I say it's Romans 11:36. For from him and through him and to him are all things, to him be the glory forever. Amen, right? So you summarize it with this, and this is what's going on in the Old Testament. All the laws are summarized in this one thing. He whittles it all down. So before don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, he says, just don't have any other gods before me. Now, here's the point. Here's the point. Our fundamental problem as human beings is to take really good things, things that God created as good, and make them ultimate things. You know this is true. Money, sex, power, identity, all these things in our lives that God has created as gifts, and we ultimately make them ultimate things. We turn them into ultimate things. We let something else, even if it's a good thing, take the place of God in our hearts. Now think about this. If you trace it back, if you trace whatever it is that you struggle with, every sin in your life, every single sin, every other failure in your life, every destructive pattern or thought in your life, all stems back to this submission of God being the only God and not putting any God before him. Whenever we sin, it's because we put something else on the throne of our lives other than God. Let me give you a couple illustrations to this. And I chose one specific illustration because it's so unusual, right? I think when we pick on sins, especially from stage, we pick on like the most obvious ones, like stop looking at porn. And it's like, you've heard that so many times, okay? So you can work these out with your own thing, but let's pick on some new people. Some people who have different sins, you're like, I'm always safe from stage when it comes to my sin because it's not so obvious. So can we talk about some different ones? Let's talk about laziness, shall we? Yes, please. All the ambitious people are like, preach, brother, let's go. And all the lazy people are like, oh, crap. Let's think about this. Let's call it a time management problem, okay? Let's say you have a time management problem. You're disorganized. You never get anything done, okay? So you never get anything done. So if you grew up in the 90s, maybe you tried. You're like, I want to get organized. I want to start getting through with my work and fulfilling the things that I'm supposed to do. I've had a habit of not getting these things done, so I'm going to get things done. Here's where I'm going to start. So in 1995, you go to Office Depot or Office Max, back when those were things, and you bought a planner. Or what were they called? Day planners? I don't even remember what they're called. They were like this thick, made out of leather, right? And so they had tabs, and you'd have colored pencils, and you would write things down on them, and this is how I'm going to get organized, and it didn't work. Just didn't work. You still didn't get anything accomplished. So now you fast forward 3 decades, and now you have an iPhone. So you have all of that, this big old folder. You now have it in your pocket. And I've seen some of y'all's home screens. And I am OCD to the core. So when I see your home screen, or you send me a screenshot of your home screen, and you've got 10,532 unread text messages, I'm judging you, 100%. And I'm scratching and itching like that. Oh, how do you live? Like, I literally do not understand how you live. And it also tells me if I text you, you're not going to read it, okay? So there's lots of things. You haven't updated an app in 10 years. There's all these things going on. So you get this phone to help organize you, and nothing works. So what's the real problem, right? You've spent hundreds of dollars on a new iPhone or this new system to help you get organized. Nothing works. What might the real problem be? And I don't want to judge you, just your screens. What might be the real problem? Because you're sitting there saying, I'm just not disciplined. I'm not disciplined. Okay, but underneath that, there might be something deeper going on. And I hate to be the therapist and you sitting on the couch, but maybe it's you can't say no. Maybe it's just you can't say no. Why can't you say no? Because you've made an idol out of the approval of man. And so you can't say no. You don't want to disappoint people, so you say yes to everything, and then you're overwhelmed, you're overcommitted, and you can't get anything done because you're overcommitted. So what people think of you matters more than what God thinks of you. Therefore, you shall have no other God before me now applies to you. Okay? Let's give another example. Let's say you're stingy and you know it. You're stingy. That should be a song. You're stingy and you know it. Okay? So you're stingy. You're stingy, but you want to be generous. All of us in this room want to be generous people, but you find it very hard to be generous, to be more generous. If your money has become your real source of security more than God, then you're never going to be able to give it away freely. So if your sense of safety in a world of uncertainty comes from your bank account or your IRA instead of your Heavenly Father, then you're going to cling to it. So under the sin of stinginess is the idol of security. I put God on the throne. I shall have no other gods before me except money. Third one. This one probably has applied to me more than any in my life. This is just me being real. Have you ever told a lie, and when you're telling the lie, you're like, why? What am I doing? Just me? Like you're literally saying the line, you're going, I know that's not true, and I know I don't even believe that. Why am I saying that? Okay, so tune in as I preach to myself for a minute. So you tell a lie, maybe you even don't know why you told it. You just think, I'm just a bad person, I'm just disobeying one of the 10 commandments, but why did I lie? And if you dig a little deeper again, you're gonna find that it might have been because you were afraid of how you would look, or you were going to lose something that you possessed, maybe a reputation, maybe a resource. All of this was at stake. Or maybe and this is probably my number one thing, you just didn't want to face the consequences. So if I lie, I can at least push it back for a little bit before I'm caught, right? And in all of this, in that moment, something more than Jesus mattered to you. Something else has come on the throne, and you've put it there. So this is why the first commandment is the problem underneath every problem. It's the unveiling of every other sin. Because every destructive feeling, everything that we struggle with or wrestle with, all is attributed to, let's put something else on the throne. I value this thing more than God himself. And God's like, listen, the number one commandment, don't have any other gods before me. And Jesus reiterates it, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, okay? So here's the truth. Unless you understand the law of God, you'll never really understand your own heart. The law has always been one of God's tools for showing his people what makes us tick, what's really going on beneath the surface. And this is God's, I don't know how else to put it, this is God's mercy. When we see our sin when it's exposed, when it's put into light, that's his mercy. It's like, I refuse to let you keep walking in this. Like, what are you going to do with this? You're putting this thing above me, and what you need on the throne of your life is me. I'm what's best for you. I need you to trust me in these specific areas. So this is what the law does for us. Now, thinking through this, 613 laws, 10 specific moral laws, all of this, it can be exhausting. I can't keep up with this. I can't keep doing this. Now, that leads us to our fifth purpose of the law, which is a beautiful one, but the way it's introduced is really weird, really, really weird. Not only is the law pointing us and marking us as his treasure, it's saying we're also a new community. We're a kingdom of priests corporately together. And then it also unveils our hearts, what things are sitting on the throne of our lives instead of God. The fifth thing is this, that the law will ultimately drive us to Jesus. It will ultimately drive us to Jesus. Now, how we get there in Exodus is really, really weird. Check out verse 7. We read this at the front, okay? So God is talking to Moses, and he says this. Then he took the book of the covenant, or Moses took the book of the covenant, everything that God had just written or said to him, he writes it down, and he comes to the people, and he took the book of the covenant, and he reads it in the hearing of the people. And all the people said, check out what they say, all. All. What does all mean? Everything, right? So everything that the Lord has spoken, we will do, and we will be obedient. Ladies and gentlemen, to put it bluntly, that was a really, really dumb response. God comes and he gives them their covenant, and he says, hey, here's all these laws, here's all these rules, 613 of them, and God presents Moses with them. Moses presents to the people. He's the mediator. He brings it to the people. Now, they're high on life, right? God has just come through for them. The plagues, the Red Sea, all of this incredible stuff. God's like, hey, I'm your people, or you're my people. I've marked you. You're my treasure. All of these things. I carried you out of Egypt on eagle's wings. Don't forget who I am, and don't forget who you are. I consecrated you. I set you apart. We're loved. We're your children. Yes. God, what do you want from us? God says, here's 613 laws. I want you to obey them. And they're like, got it. I'll do every single one of them. 2.5 million people all say that we will obey all 613 laws forever. Foolish. How quickly do you think they failed? I bet it was right there on the spot, right? 2.5 million people saying we're going to accomplish everything. Their response should have been, hey, God, we're going to give it a shot, right? We will obey most of the time, and we're going to try to obey a lot of it, and we will try to obey often, but they go all in. We will obey everything. And of course, I think that's what God wanted them to say. Now check out how Moses responds to the people. Verse 8. You couldn't, like if you had a million guesses on how Moses would respond, you would never get it. They're like, hey, we'll obey everything. Verse 8. So Moses took blood and threw it on the people. Do you have that one in your notes? Like, hey, we'll obey everything. Oh yeah? That would have been a great visual aid today if I just threw water balloons at you with red dye in it. That would have been cool. That would have made it on Pastors with Props for sure. So Moses took the blood, threw it on the people, and he said, behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. We'll obey everything, all the laws. We got it, 613, we got it. And how we do that, right? God, the sin that I struggle with, as of today, never again. Promise, commit, never again. I will obey all your words for all times. I will never make a mistake again until 3 minutes later when I fall flat on my face doing the same dumb thing, and where the Apostle Paul is saying, why do I keep doing the things that I don't want to do, and I never do the things that I do want to do? What's going on? And Moses throws blood on him. Moses throws blood on him. That's weird to us. But to them, this would have been totally normal. Remember this culture, because of how long ago it wasn't a written culture when it came to covenants, right? It wasn't. We got God's covenant in writing, thank God. But when you made a covenant amongst parties, you didn't write it on parchment or papyrus and then seal it with a notary, right? And then file it in your filing cabinet or put it on your computer, scan it on your computer to have for the rest of time. You didn't have that. Instead, the way covenants were sealed was in a dramatic fashion. They were acted out. And what was acted out specifically was the penalty if you broke the covenant. If you broke the covenant, this is what's going to happen to you. We see this in a couple places in the Old Testament, in Genesis chapter 15 and in Jeremiah 34. We see God say, hey, go split this animal in half and walk right through it, because this is what I'm going to do to you if you break covenant with me. Okay, so this is what's happening. If I break covenant, may I become like this animal. This is the covenant arrangement. So when Moses throws blood on the people, it's their way of saying, all together, corporately, if we fail to do everything that we just promised, everything in this covenant, may our blood be shed. Come on, guys. 613 laws, we're going to obey all of them. And if we break one of them to the smallest degree, kill us. May our blood be on our head. So what happened next in the story? How does God respond? God's like, all right, the minute you sin, I'm just going to zap you and wipe you, and I'm going to spill your blood. You're gone. What happens? Verse 9. Then Moses and Aaron, so the priest, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel. So these are the 70 that have been set aside. These are the leaders of Israel. They went up to the top of Mount Sinai, verse 10, and they saw the God of Israel. And I would imagine by verse 10, some laws have been broken by some of the 2.5 million people, if not these 70 men that were going up. They saw the God of Israel. Doesn't say they saw his face. They'd be in trouble if they saw his face. But they saw the God of Israel, so God's going to wipe them out. He's going to split them in half. He's going to demand their blood of them. God's going to wipe them out because they have screwed up. This is how it continues. There was under his feet, under God's feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness, of something beautiful and pure. Verse 11, and he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. Instead, they beheld God, and they ate and drank. And I think we read through Exodus so quickly that we lose the power of that moment. These people should have been wiped out the minute they saw God. They've committed to obeying his covenant and his commandments like they should. Hey, good job. But now they don't have the ability to actually obey those commandments. So what is God going to do? Is God going to spill their blood? They see God, and God invites them to eat with him. So in the Near East, and we talked about this years ago, in the Near East, to bring someone into your home, not to go out to a restaurant, but to invite somebody into your home and share a meal with them, was the ultimate act of intimacy and friendship. It was saying, I'm bringing you into my life, I'm welcoming you to my table. This was the blessing of the covenant, God treasuring his people, inviting them into his presence. And the question has to be, how could he do that? They're guilty. They've said they were going to do all these things for him, and they by verse 10, they're slipped up. They've messed up. It's implied here. How can God bring them into his presence? And they might be thinking, God, you can bring me into your presence, if from this point forward, I obey everything. This is how the law works, right? If I'm a good boy, I'm brought in. If I'm a good girl, I'm brought in. This is how the world thinks. This is how they think they're going to heaven. If my good outweighs my bad, then we're good. So maybe we're thinking, I screwed up, but God, my good still outweighs my bad, so I can still be in your presence. But this is a holy God where sin cannot be in his presence. We don't have the ability to obey these commands. We don't have ability to obey these laws. Who can keep them perfectly? How can they possibly get into the presence of God? And even if they did for a moment, how could they stay there with their sinful hearts? And the answer for us, centuries later, this answer for us comes in the Gospels and then reiterated in 1 Corinthians 11. On the night when Jesus was betrayed, he lifted up a cup, so he's betrayed. Like, you broke covenant with me, Judas. You broke the rules. You broke all of this. On the night he was betrayed, Jesus lifted up a cup, and he said to his disciples, men who knew, and these were men who knew the book of Exodus inside and out. He says to them, this is the blood of the new covenant. Every time we come to the Lord's table, every time we come to his supper, we hear it again. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. What does that mean? Hebrews 10 tells us, let us, Christians, let us draw near to God with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled, blood thrown on us, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water by Jesus' blood. So on the cross, Jesus' blood was shed. That means he took the curse so we could receive his blessing. He's the perfect one, not you. He fully obeyed God. He deserves to see God face to face. We deserve to have our blood shed to eternal death. That means not only are you brought into the covenant by grace, but you also remain in the covenant through his grace. So now you don't have to be afraid of the law. This is beautiful. You no longer, because of what Jesus has done, and this is what he means by fulfilled the law, you no longer have to be afraid of the law. Instead, you can use it. Not to try to earn points with God or to earn his acceptance, but instead to be shaped by it, to let it mold you into a glorious new community and priesthood, to let it expose the deepest things that are wrong in your heart so you can become more like him, to let it shape you into the person God has made you to be. You don't have to be perfect because he was perfect. But with everything in you, your desire is sanctification and discipleship. I want to become more like you. And to ultimately let it draw you to the person and work of Jesus. And you're going to fail. You're going to fail until the day you're face to face with Jesus. But he still invites you to his table to eat and drink of his presence. So, the 5 purposes of the law: it makes you his treasure, makes you a new community, it marks you as a kingdom of priests, it reveals what's going on really in your heart, and then finally, it brings you to Jesus. It drives you to Jesus. Maybe this morning, for the first time, you're realizing deep down, your heart still runs on that principle. If I do these things, then I'm good with God. If I do these right things, I'll be blessed, and God will answer my prayers and do what I want him to do. And then I'll matter to God if I do these things. If that's how your life works, then everything in your life is going to be a grind and it's going to be exhausting. You're going to go into work tomorrow, not just to work, but to prove yourself. You're going to make money, not just for provision, but for validation, to show that you're important. And you're going to date, not just to love somebody, but to say, if I find somebody impressive enough, then I know I'm okay. And ladies and gentlemen, when that's the engine driving you, you will both be exploited and you will exploit others. And when anything goes wrong, your emotions are going to spiral. You're going to get frustrated because your identity was tapped into that thing. And Jesus says, let me reverse the way this works. Let me reverse your heart. Look at what I have done for you. And now you can say, Father, please accept me, not because of what I've done or what I am doing, but accept me because of what Jesus has done. And know that on eagle's wings, he is carrying you out of bondage and he is keeping you out of bondage. This is who our God is.